in the meeting. This is a public meeting of the Housing Advisory Board being conducted on remote on Zoom, following the rules of our former governor. And that includes beginning with a roll call, which I'll do right now. Have members first. Alex Krieger.
Here.
Jonathan Klein.
Here.
Mike Jacobs.
There.
Steve Hyken.
Here.
Carol Gladstone.
Here.
Sean O'Neill. Sean is on.
Hi.
And she's here. Bernard Green, who's gonna unmute.
I'm here.
Welcome, Bernard, and I'm here. So we have a quorum plus. I will now call for the staff, beginning with Emily DeHogue.
Here.
Oh,
And let's see, am I ending with Emily DeHogue?
Yeah, I think so. We might have one more a bit later.
Okay, so that's enough to begin the meeting. Thank you, everybody, for attending, and those members of the public who I see on the screen, thank you for joining and for your interest. We will, as we normally begin with approval or review and approval of the minutes, we don't have yet we've had a very recent meeting, and those meetings are not ready for approval. I think we'll have them on the 14th, which is a little less than 2 weeks away. And with that, we've got only a few agenda items. I don't think we'll be needing or using. Oh, Kara is coming in. Welcome, Kara. And we will begin with the main item of the day, which will be the now long-awaited formal presentation from our AHUD subcommittee. Jonathan, I believe, is going to present, and we are anticipating a not only discussion, but hopefully a vote at the end of this segment. Jonathan.
Thank you. Am I allowed to share my screen?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh.
So everyone can see that, right?
yeah.
So introducing myself, although I think I know everyone here, I'm Jonathan Klein. I'm a member of the Housing Advisory Committee. I'm a town meeting member from Precinct 17, and I was also had the privilege of acting as chair of the Affordable Housing Overlay District Study Subcommittee, which was formed by the Housing Advisory Board. And this is a report on the process findings and recommendations of that subcommittee that was issued on June 11th. You've all received a full copy of the report, and I hope you've had a chance to read it. This is a slide deck that is is a summary, so it doesn't go into all the detail, of course, and I won't go into all the detail. It was about a 12-page report, I believe. So the membership, you've seen this before, was myself, Steve Hyken, and Rita McDally from the HAB were also on the committee. Kimberly Richardson, who is an affordable housing resident and was the co-petitioner of Article 41, was on the committee. We had two subject matter experts, Amy Schechtman and Sharonda Ellis, the respective CEOs of Two Life Communities and Jamaica Plain NDC. We had Alice McGarvey, who was a BHS student at the time, is now a college student, and was a co-petitioner of warrant Article 41, and Marion Friedman Gerspan, who is a town meeting member and who was appointed by the Council on Aging. So it was quite a august committee, except for myself, of course. The committee's process was that we met monthly or bi-monthly starting in April 2023. We spent a lot of time educating ourselves and reviewing basic zoning concepts, Brookline's zoning, the MBTA Communities Act, which was very hot at the time, and understanding what that was about. We asked for and got a budget from the HAB to hire a consultant, RKG Associates, when we realized that we really didn't understand the economics and couldn't do that without outside help. And so with the HAB's financial support, I think we ended up signing a contract for about $44,000 or $45,000, and they provided quite detailed assistance. And we did a feasibility analysis, which considered zoning, cost, income levels, and site types. That was what the work was that they did. So before I get to findings, I will just show you this other document that I think you've seen before. I know you can't read that, but this is a document that is called the Brookline AHOT Study Committee Rolling Minutes and Agendas. And I know I've distributed a link to this before. It's publicly available. I'll ask Emily if she could distribute it again after the meeting. And you will see here that there is a link to all of the materials and resources that we considered. So we considered, warrant Article 21 and the HAB resolution and a zoning presentation. There was draft reports, there were financial models from RKG. There is a copy of the resolution here. So, and there are minutes of all of our meetings. So detailed background on everything we did. So I'm going to jump right to the key findings on feasibility. We found, and this was based on the work that RKG did, that 5 to 7 story buildings, which are wood frame over a concrete podium, are the most cost efficient for building multifamily housing, especially affordable housing. And that could make 100% affordable housing feasible with a significant town subsidy. Second, that 40 to 50 unit buildings having units at 30% of AMI, adjusted median income, and 60% AMI, optimize the state and federal subsidies that are available for these kinds of projects. We found that, that 80% and 120% AMI units, which are specifically called out in warrant Article 41. So warrant Article 41 asked to look at affordability levels at 30%, 60%, 80%, and 120%. What we found is that the 80% and the 120% AMI units actually hurt feasibility. A little bit counterintuitive, but the reason for that is that they are not entitled to any subsidy, but they don't produce enough income to cover their cost. And that would make a difference of about $3 or $4 million for a typical development. We found that sites in North Brookline, which is mostly what we mean when we refer to the TPOD, the Transportation and Parking Overlay District, which is almost all of North Brookline. It's anything within a half a mile of a major transit node. Were most viable, mostly because the rents and the purchase prices and the rents you could get on units were higher. We found that underground parking is very expensive, about $100,000 a space. And so requiring underground parking is problematic for making projects feasible. And finally, and perhaps our most controversial finding is this one, that a 50-50 mix of actually 53% affordable to be technical and 47% market would produce the most feasible project requiring the least amount of subsidy. And that by having 50% market rate units or 47% market rate units, that would in fact cross-subsidize some of the affordable units and create a project that could use much less town subsidy in order to become feasible. And in fact, may require no town subsidy if you got the right amount of state and federal subsidy for a development. So here's the conclusion, and I'm quoting here directly from the report. If Brookline is willing to allow 5 to 7 story buildings, and I personally think more likely it has to be 6 or 7, similar in density to the 2 successful nonprofit development projects in North Brookline, 370 Harvard Street and 108, both nonprofit and for-profit developers may be able to build either 100% affordable developments at 30% and 60% of AMI, assuming the availability of tax credits, vouchers, and local funding, and it would require about $3 or $4 million of local funding, or 50% affordable, 50% market rate developments, which would require significantly fewer tax credits and much less or little, if any, local funding. So that is the conclusion that the committee reached. So we also talked about potential sites that an affordable housing overlay district, which would uh, 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 have zoning changes to allow projects of the type I just described and where those could be. Cambridge, some of you may know, has declared the whole city of Cambridge an affordable housing overlay district. We took a different approach and thought we should focus on the areas where we thought there were currently the opportunity for more development and more intense, significant development, and that had been called out actually in other studies that had been done, including the housing production plan, which this board, was responsible for and approved, a 2018 plan that was done by the, I think, EDAB, that Steve Heiken probably mentioned a little bit more about. And the list of places is here: Harvard Street Corridor, which we just rezoned, but which has not seen any development. There are particular sites along there that may be particularly susceptible to more development. Along Beacon Street, especially St. Mary's and Washington Square. The south side of Commonwealth Avenue, that's over by BU, has a lot of development potential. Chestnut Hill West is getting a lot of conversation within the town right now. Fisher Hill West, which is a town-owned site of 3.4 acres that the town is focusing on what to do with. One site in South Brookline, Putterham Circle, we think has capacity for additional development and could potentially host an affordable housing overlay district. So, what are our recommendations? Our recommendations are, number one, that we need to educate the public on the costs and zoning needs to produce significantly affordable housing. Number two, after significant discussion, the committee agreed that 50% affordable at 30 and 60% of AMI would most likely succeed, given the available subsidy. And that's despite a very strong desire, and I will say, I'll call it a minority interest in really sticking with the 100% affordable model, which was what the warrant article 41 called for. That was our most, I would say, controversial and difficult recommendation to reach. We recommended a policy of a friendly 40B that could be implemented quite easily, potentially, by encouraging the zoning board to give very favorable consideration to any 40B, whether or not we're above 10% for either a 50% or 100% affordable project. We recommended drafting an overlay zoning in key locations and sites, the ones I listed before, and zoning changes with enhanced inclusionary zoning that might be part of site-specific studies where we are looking at significant development sites. So, the next step, this says this is out of date. It says AHOD subcommittee vote on final report. That was approved. So that step has already been accomplished. This step, which is the HAB review and approval, if you are so inclined tonight, and we have a draft resolution to present. The resolution suggests that we should submit the study and our findings to the Select Board, the Comprehensive Plan Steering Committee, the Planning Board, EDAB, and the ZBA, and then launching education and engagement efforts. So that is what I've got other than the resolution. And as long as I've got the floor, maybe should I go through the resolution, Roger?
Yes,
Or
please do.
turn over the floor?
Please do,
I'd
Jonathan.
like to ask, particularly Steve, if he has anything to add, since he was also on the committee and played a key role in. First of all, I need to thank Steve. He played a key drafting role in drafting that excellent report and in helping me work up this slide deck. So let me stop sharing. And then share again. Can everyone see this? Yes, okay. So this is a draft resolution. You will see some changes to it that have been suggested since the draft that you received. So there was a draft that was attached to the materials. This is redlined and shows the changes since then, but it is resolved that the HAB approves the final report and endorses the conclusion and recommendations set forth in the final report on page 9. And further, resolve to forward it to the select board, the comp plan steering committee, the planning board, the EDAB, the ZBA, and that we have the following specific action requests. First, that the HAB and the select board consider, and this was changed from the zoning board, adopting a detailed policy for a quote, local option friendly 40B process that would give strong consideration to eligible projects that meet our criteria for at least 50% affordability, number one. Number two, and I'm going to look to Carol. Where's Carol? You're here, right? Oh, Carol Gladstone, yes. To help with maybe the wording of this next one, that the comp plan steering committee consider the recommendations in the report as part of their housing strategy for the comp plan and include discussion of the AHOD strategy idea as part of their community outreach, which I know they're planning this fall. And then finally, that the EDAB and the planning board take other actions that they think might be helpful or advisable, in connection with this report. And finally, a resolve to thank the excellent members of the AHOD steering committee and the excellent members of the staff, particularly, Kara and Emily, who provided a lot of assistance to us in reviewing the report, revising the report, commenting on it, and really assisting the committee throughout our, I guess, 2.5 years so far. So I will stop. I'll invite maybe if I could, Steve, to comment briefly, if you could, on anything I might have missed, and then hopefully leave a lot of time for discussion.
Okay, Jonathan, thanks. I don't have too much to add to this. I do want to make clear, though, that the AHOD study committee's subcommittee's report, which is, as Jonathan mentioned, like 11 pages or so, is a kind of a summary of the whole process. But the other important document is the feasibility study that RKG did, which identified in terms of costs and impacts and how this might work in different parts of town and scale of project, et cetera, and different levels of affordability. That RKG report is really the key document, the key consultant document that we obtained. And I think it's also worth noting, in the context of referring this report and our findings to the Comp Plan Study Committee, that RKG, that they are these days, I guess, the town's go-to consultants for economic development feasibility, because they're also the consultants to the Comp Plan Steering Committee, and they're the consultants on the Chestnut Hill West study. So they really ought to be able to help share, the data on feasibility and opportunity, and make sure that the dots are connected among all this work that the town is doing in these different areas. I also want to say that this whole thing was inspired by, I know Jonathan mentioned that Cambridge has adopted an AHOD policy that is citywide. Somerville also has an AHOD zoning strategy, which I think is more similar. Doesn't cover the whole city. It's more neighborhood or district based. And they are actually getting projects accomplished. Certainly in Cambridge, I'm aware of some because the firm I helped work for many years is doing some. I think this is a very worthwhile strategy. I want to make the point, as I've made, probably people have heard me say this before, when you compare this to a 40B project, which is 25% affordable and 75% market, to get a project that is half affordable, or actually under our actual measurements, 53% affordable, sounds like a good deal. And particularly if, as RKG's analysis shows, that they would require relatively little, if any, local subsidy. So I think we're off to a strong start. Roger mentioned that there have been other studies which were broadly supported by the community, including both housing production plans and that 2018 EDAB sponsored study, which looked at opportunities in the commercial districts, which substantial public input, which recommended 3 to 5 or 3 to 6 story mixed-use developments virtually in all the commercial districts that are mentioned here. So this has been this kind of approach has been validated by community input over and over again, and I think we're just doing it one more time, but with a new twist in this going beyond the 40B 25% affordable housing strategy. So that's my little bit of addition. Thank you.
All right, thank you. You're muted, Roger.
Thanks, Jonathan. Very concise and clear report. Much appreciated to your committee, and please extend both our thanks and particularly our regrets to Alice, who waited through the whole last meeting only to be disappointed in not being here for this. So I guess let's start with HAB members who have questions or comments, and I see Bernard's
I think Michael was first.
Oh, Mike's first? Okay.
Yeah.
Mike?
Thanks, Jonathan and committee. I think it's a great report. I commend you all for doing all that research to get to this. I think your strategy of having specific sites rather than what Cambridge is doing is right. I think it would be pretty tough to get this through if you didn't suggest specific sites. And I'd add Babcock Street parking lot to this as well. My one comment is on the whole concept of the 50% or 53% affordable. It always worries me about just looking at numbers and seeing how on paper numbers work, and I worry about whether the concept works. So I'm always curious whether there are examples, good examples of 43%, 47 affordable, 47% market projects that are out there that work. Because it sounds great just from, seeing the pro forma, but I'm always curious whether that's a marketable project. It sounds great that we have a project that might not need town subsidy or state subsidy, but I am curious about whether it's a model that works. So that's my one comment. Thank you.
Michael, I asked to comment on that. I asked an MAPC group, the Inner Core, if anybody had a project like that. And Somerville, I believe, does in the works. I forgot the address. I'll look that up, but I think they have like 2 different buildings on the same lot, and then they figure out the financing with the 2 buildings, with the mix and all that. So I'll look up that project and put in the chat.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, if I could answer briefly, I mean, I've worked on numerous projects like that over my career. They are harder to do. They are harder to do in some ways because of the difficulty of mixing different populations and of doing underwriting both for market units and subsidized units. But community builders, where I used to work, preferred that as a model and often did projects that their projects were often a third, a third very low income, a third tax credit, and then a third market rate, especially, that I think was an official BRA, Boston Redevelopment Authority policy for all the property they disposed of in the South End, for example. Tent City, in the South End by Copley Plaza is a good example of that. So it's hard to do, but it is possible. And I know some nonprofits prefer that. Others prefer to do 100% affordable projects, which would be great if they're able to do it. That would be good too. If you set a minimum threshold of 50 or 53%, you can get both, right? Depending on what the developer wants to do.
Yeah, I could add to that. I mean, in my career, we did a lot of work with the for-profit developer, Trinity Financial. And some of those projects were public housing replacements under the federal Hope 6 program, where again, there was a sort of 1/3 approximately no longer public housing units, but public housing equivalent units where people paid the same 30% of the rent, 1/3 other tax credit and 1/3 market. I think actually the Maverick development on the waterfront in East Boston is one of Trinity's early projects of that type. And that is a mix of public housing replacement, tax credit, and market rate units. One example. And Pam Goodman's longtime firm, Beacon Communities, is doing that, has been doing that as well.
We in Brookline, one last observation on that. It's a good question before going to Bernard and then Carol. Um, um, Broadly defined, I would say that we actually have done two such projects right here in Brookline that many of you are quite familiar with. One a town-owned site and another a formerly church-owned site. Assuming that the concept is somewhere between the 100% affordable model and the 40B and inclusionary zoning low affordability model. St. Aidan's falls within that mix. It isn't 50%, but I think it's about 60-40 or something like that. And so that would be one. And as you may know, that involved several different buildings, new and existing. And also Olmsted Hill up on Fisher Hill was a town-owned site and a subdivision, which included more than 50% affordable, but quite a number of market rate units on a street that was created with the affordables in one multifamily set of buildings and the market rates in terms of high-end single family units. Bernard.
Yeah, let me just throw out an idea and also figure out how to make it a little more coherent. The trend here in Brookline and probably many other places is very rich and very poor families. And, I don't think that that's sustainable. I'm not a sociologist, but I think that, separate from the financial issues, concerns, that's probably a problem. So, while it makes sense to include, all types of mixes, I think it'd be good to try to incentivize developments that have the whole range, including workforce level units, so that you don't have a project where some people are very high income and some people are very low income. I just don't think that is a good mix for a variety of reasons. And it seems to me that sort of addresses certain financial concerns, and that is the middle income housing requires or sort of kind of cross subsidizes the lower income housing, and maybe even brings down the the necessary cost for the upper income or market rate housing. But anyway, I throw that out, because my concern is, the trend in Brookline is for the town to become comprised of a lot of very rich people and a lot of very poor, not a lot, but a number of or some very poor people.
Thanks, Bernard. Carol.
I think Jonathan wanted to answer that question, so I'll wait, let him do that.
Okay.
Well, I'll just very briefly, I mean, social engineering is hard, right? And being very prescriptive about things makes it harder to do. So I agree with you. I'd much rather see a development that has a range of incomes. What we found is that targeting that missing middle is really very hard because there's no subsidies that help them out, and there's not enough rent or that's produced by those units to cover their costs. So I think we, by setting broader outlines, we leave creative developers, both for profit and nonprofit, to come up with what they think is a good model. But I'm sympathetic to the concern. It's a hard thing to solve.
Yeah, this goes back to when Jonathan pointed out that in the feasibility study that RKG did, that units that were at 80 to 120% of AMI made projects less feasible because they weren't entitled to subsidies. I might add that the idea of an overlay district, which wouldn't change the underlying zoning, although personally I think the underlying zoning in some of our commercial districts is inadequate. But by doing an overlay district where the developers might otherwise only be able to build a small project with a few larger units, by allowing them to build larger projects that go higher with more units, my thinking, and from the work I've done in my career, is that when you have a multifamily building, I can't say that the rents in the market proportion of the building would be necessarily affordable if in that market, but the units would not tend to be the kinds of large 2,500, 3,000 square foot condos that developers are building in our two-family districts, the T districts. They would be 1 and 2 bedroom units, maybe a couple of 3-bedroom units, which just by their scale would not cost as much as the condos that are being built under the large condos that are being built under our current zoning.
I don't know if others saw the pop-up that I did, but it's a relevant comment. I know we have Susan Senator here waiting for the next agenda item on 16 Williams, but she's noting that the 5347, that kind of a general mix could have useful application for the kinds of special needs housing that we're looking at 16 Williams, and I don't know, she's very familiar with. Regarding what Bernard, just real quick, Mike, regarding your comment, Bernard, and concern, one of the things that we might think about doing there to directly address that would be adopting a policy regarding the way we look at the deployment of our housing trust funds to create one kind of unit or another on a priority basis. So if we had the appropriate underlying policy to address your concern and others, Bernard, we could, when an AHOD project came along that we were looking at the financials on the so-called market rate side of it, would run up to the unaffordable levels. We could have a policy that suggested that we put more trust fund subsidy per unit in projects like that, where we could create a middle, the 100 to 120 AMI, which comes a lot closer to carrying itself, whether it's rental or condo, and could be made feasible with a thinner subsidy to create that middle, and avoid what Bernard, you were phrasing as the project where only has the luxury high end and then the very low income. So that would be a way to do it, by a policy using some of the resources that we know we're going to have, perhaps. Mike.
I just want to clarify, I'm not trying to be a doomsayer or someone who's against mixed income housing. I financed a lot of Jonathan's projects when I was at Mass Housing. Our Brookline examples, though, are in fact are projects where the low-income units were separate from the market units. St. Aidan's had a low-income building, and Fisher Hill had a low-income ownership project separate from the market. So I hope, following what Bernard was saying, that we really can have mixed income integrated developments, as opposed to developments which really are somewhat separate. And yes, they are challenging. I think it's a fantastic goal to achieve, and if there are ways to do that and incentivize that, that's great. So I just wanted to point out, the challenges of doing that, and not to be a doomsayer. So
You're right, and those are shortcomings of the two projects that I mentioned in Brookline, which are successful by some standards, but not by the ones that you're mentioning and that Bernard was expressing concern about. Carol.
So I have a question following on the unit, on the missing middle, and it's really just a lot of it's related to unit. It starts with the unit size, and I'm wondering if there was anything in the work that RKG did in terms of modeling call it 50-50 split in terms of their assumption about unit mix, unit size, or what they maybe saw from existing 40Bs that would help us predict a little bit what that market rate part would be. Is there, Jonathan or Steve, is there anything that can we offer any advice on that?
I don't think that RKG actually got down to the level of unit size. I mean, they did look at numbers of units and overall floor area ratio, which kind of determined, if
Right. Well,
you
I mean,
if you
there's-
needed 50 units and you had a floor area ratio of 2 or 2.5, that kind of says something about the average size of a unit. But I
Right.
don't think they delved into it any further than that.
But even just that you're talking about a scale of unit of 50 units, and there's an overall volume of a building you're doing, that is actually suggesting something about unit size, right?
Right.
I'm sure there's an assumption there. I don't I don't remember it and I can't find it quickly, but it's a good question. And I'm sure it
So
was part of it.
I was going to also just make a comment and offer some help on this. I realize we're so deep in this that I think this presentation probably needs a little bit more sort of background, like what is an AHOD? You know, what does it do? Why does it make things more feasible? And I would be glad to actually, Jonathan, work with you and Steve or whoever is the author here to do that. Kind of think about people who are coming at this completely new. So I would be glad to do that with you guys.
Thank you. Absolutely. I totally accept that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So we can figure out how to do that.
Because the community outreach and education.
One quick
part-
thing, I couldn't, the links didn't seem to work in the appendix. So if you could just check that, when I tried to click on the links, they just didn't seem to work.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll send it out afterwards. It may not be working through the chat or what I did quickly. Sorry about that.
So I'll just add a final just comment, which is I think this is a great thing to kind of try to advance and hope potentially addresses several different housing goals that people have expressed. And so I'm strongly and enthusiastically supportive of Jonathan's resolution. And if it's time, I'll move approval.
And I'll second it.
I have a question before we take the vote and then move to the vote, but I'm glad we're moving towards toward the vote. Did the consultant leave you with any kind of tool to do any kind of sensitivity analysis? By that, I would mean if the town put 50, 100, 150,000 more per unit into the market side component, what would we get back for that in terms of buying down from full market to upper middle income?
So the answer is absolutely. They created a really fabulous tool. They turned it over to the town staff and also to I think members of the subcommittee who wanted to work with it. I actually had to upgrade my my Excel program so that I could have enough power to run the darn thing. It's a pretty complex tool and it allows all kinds of changes in inputs and assumptions. So I think it would be available to test a lot of alternate scenarios. We also have they did a training for us on how to use it. And that training, I think, is captured in a recording. And so that is available for anybody that has the time and energy and interest to pursue that. So we have the tool, we have the training, we have the information.
Good, excellent. Yeah, that's terrific. And then the only other maybe half question, half comment. In the resolution that we're about to vote on, I support everything there in terms of the recommendations and the direction and everything about it. Just want to confirm one thing, however, the reference to the TPOD and the TPOD map. By adopting the resolution here, we are not expressing endorsement for making the AHOD co-terminus with the TPOD map, right? That's referenced in passing, but not part of your focused resolution.
No, I don't think we are. I mean, we found that these developments would be more feasible, within the TPOD and within North Brookline, and that's how they were resolved. But we're actually not recommending that there be an AHOD that consists of the North Brookline. We're recommending that it be considered for the specific sub-districts that we've talked about, perhaps the Harvard Corridor, St. Mary's, Washington Street, particular parts where we would have to do a lot more work to draw a much more precise boundary, right? There's a lot of work to that, which we didn't get to, and it's hard to do. It needs, professional planning staff to help with that. But so we're not suggesting that there be a AHOD that is overlapping directly with
An AHOD TPOD, yeah, because
Yeah.
that map with all of the half-mile radiuses is extends to huge swaths of Brookline terrain, many times the size of what the recommendations and the resolution
Exactly.
are
I'm
focused
sorry,
on.
Roger, is the TPOD mentioned in this resolution?
Not in the
No,
resolution.
no, it's not. It's in the report, and so I'm not greatly concerned, but I just wanted to confirm that it's that we are voting on the focused aspects of what we're looking at. So let's have the vote. We've had the motion second. If there's no further discussion, and I don't see any other hands raised.
Well, I'll make,
Jonathan, the motion's made in second, so we're going to vote. Jonathan, you want to start?
I vote yes.
Of course, yes. Mike,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
Alex,
Yes.
Carol,
Yes,
Bernard,
Yeah, I'm gonna abstain as usual, but I think this is a good report and a good resolution. I just think that the definitional section that Carol suggested is going to be an important part of the report because a lot of people who are reading it really have no idea what some of the concepts are that we're talking about, at least no deep idea or understanding. So.
yes, makes sense for sure. And the resolution itself has been edited to include the select board being on the consider adopting. So since it will be coming to you, your normal reason for abstaining, of course, applies here. Sean,
Yes,
and unless I've missed anybody, it's a little harder to follow with the shared screen, but I think I'm the only one left, and the chair votes yes as well. So we have a unanimous and looks like enthusiastic vote. Thanks again, Jonathan.
Thank you.
Steve.
You?
Anything
There's still
else?
a lot of work to be, there's still a lot of work to be done, but I think this is a really important step in moving this idea along and engaging other parts of the town in focusing on it and really trying to bring it to fruition.
Absolutely. Very good. So we'll move to our next, the order on the agenda is, next one is the ADUs. I don't think this will be long and it's mostly informational. I guess I can start, but invite Emily and Tara, who's here, to join this, and anybody else that wishes to. And a couple of our publics are here that, including, I think, Deb and Susan. So we covered the beginnings of this last time, I think briefly, and you all know that the state issued what we weren't expecting, which was a detailed set of regulations following the adoption of the statute. The regulations came in February. We all knew immediately that our recent work product of creating the article, putting it through town meeting, was going to be way out of whack overnight. And for anybody that has read even through once the very long Attorney General's opinion, which was received a couple of weeks ago, I believe now. It's a heavy lift just to read it, and it's going to be a heavy lift, I think, to slog through and make all the necessary technical changes to bring us into to line on that. I've spoken with Kara, and she I think may comment here as well that two aspects of that will be the technical regulatory side of this, that the department and her folks will be having a lead role on, and in addition to the town council's office, probably Jonathan Simpson, who did most of the work collaboratively last time on this. And then we will have participation from the HAB, probably likely through I'm hoping or thinking relatively small appointed subcommittee, which we will plan to take up and do an appointment at our next meeting in less than 2 weeks, is my anticipation now. Emily's going to have a major role in this as well, on both fronts, but including the essential aspect that we've had some discussions of in our recent HAB meetings, which is the community outreach and education and promotion of whatever it is that we end up with, which has been, we know what it is because we've seen the regulations and the act And so I think those of us that have looked at it have a sense of what our warrant article that has to go through will say, but it's not yet, of course, been adopted. Emily, Kara, please add to this as you see fit.
I think you did a great job, Roger. We have a meeting that was trying to pull everybody together who might be relevant on staff to just start talking about, or to continue to talk about what are next steps. So that'll be in a few weeks, and put our heads together, start the process of moving forward with figuring this out.
I saw Kara, but I'm not sure if she's come and gone or not, but I did want to, there you are. You've come on view. Thanks, Kara. Do you want to weigh in on at this point? I know you and I have had a couple of discussions or.
No, not yet. I think the meeting, your next had meeting will be better to get into this.
Okay. Not to shut down prematurely, if there's any HAB members at this point that have any specific questions that they want to raise at this moment, or that things that you haven't heard or aren't satisfied with. Otherwise, we'll move on to the next important item. I don't see any, and therefore we will move to 16 William Street. I think that you all have received from Emily, and we're delighted that the staff and the department moved so quickly to figure out what had to be done. Ioana is not here at the moment, but I know Emily and Ioana have worked intensely on this, as well as Kara, to get out what ended up being, using the acronyms, an RFI, request for information, I think, rather than, or interest, I don't know which, rather than the more formal, longer process, which is required under what we know as an RFP, request for proposals. So, you know from last time that we have a right of first refusal with a deadline to have a third party qualified and committed, one would hope, by September 2nd, with a closing by December 1st. $3 million purchase price bogey. What the HAB voted for last time to recommend to the select board, you probably know it was held in an executive session, but they did have a good discussion and adopted the HAB's recommendation, therefore authorizing the issuance of the RFI. There's been a lot of great outreach informally in advance, up until even going on as we speak, with anybody who's interested in this knows or thinks they know that could be a qualified respondent to the RFI. We also know that the HAB has, in terms of our ability to help, and we really, I think everybody expressed desire to help support in every way, including financially, any potentially qualified body that can continue with the mission of special needs affordable housing in that site. We have 933,000 of available funds in the trust. Looking at this, if we decide we want to really do what we can to make something happen with a qualified candidate, we don't actually know until we see some responses what amount would be needed to accomplish the goal. It may be within the 933 or it may not. So I'll wind up my comments and have others speak at the moment. We are presently over encumbered or over committed with our 8.4 million of total trust funds, trust fund balance, because 7.5 million is at present earmarked as a result of a vote last fall by the select board to fulfill all of the requirements at the Walnut High project, which is now, of course, delayed for a year. And so the 50% of that 7.5 million, which was and is supposed to come through from CPA sourced funds, we are hoping to see the replenishment of the trust with CPA funds that would in turn release a balance available. The whole thing wouldn't be needed, but at least give us a near-term greater available balance than the present 933,000. I'll take a breath there and ask for stuff, either any staff or other HAB members that want to speak. Emily, since you were working with Iwana on getting the RFI out, maybe you'd like to pick up at this point.
Yeah, I think you did a great job, Roger. The information is in the document. I think a couple more things are going to be posted soon. Information including the right of first refusal, and possibly some photos. But I think the main point is, if you know people that are interested, make sure that they get the documents and they sign up to do the tour, which will be on Monday. So please get them to sign up, send me an email so I can get them on the list and they can check out the property.
And it's a request, the RFI is not requiring a heavy lift by respondents, right? It's mainly an expression of interest and identifying who they are and how they might be able to do this. And is there much more to it than that? They don't need specific plans, right?
I don't believe specific plans. There in the section 5, there's response requirements. So we are trying to get a good amount of information to be able to evaluate the people who respond, and make sure that we can compare different responses. How many we get, we don't know yet. So yeah, there are a few questions that we're looking for them to get to fill out for us.
And the immediate deadline is less than 2 weeks from the issue date, I believe. It's very
It's very quick.
Turnaround.
Yes.
Have members. Carol, you've got your hand up. You're muted.
Roger, I just want to make sure I understand something. So right now we have to support the Walnut High project so that they could have enough subsidy to keep going with what they need to do. We've committed affordable housing trust money that's going to be substituted by CPA money, right?
Yeah, that's our
And
expectation, yes.
when that money comes in, that will free up $3.5 million of capacity. Is that right?
That's right.
Right. So I guess there's obviously I'm getting a lot of email, and obviously from people who are at this, have attended both the previous meeting and this. There's a lot of interest and a lot of urgency on this William Street thing. Is there a way for us to use? It would be horrible to lose this opportunity because the town can't commit sufficient money and in a timely fashion. Is there a way to either, I don't even know what.
No, let me just pick up quickly on that. You're absolutely right. It's a question that has been legitimately raised, including, and the select board is certainly aware of this. The two things are going to have to happen in sequence, and I'm anticipating number one, the first of those two things should be something that the HAB will do at its next meeting in less than 2 weeks, which is to vote a request, because everything regarding the trust fund goes in 2 steps, one from us and then to the select board for a reaction and a decision. And we would be framing a request for the select board, to, I'll say, undo. In other words, they have already voted twice on this particular matter. They voted way back to do the 50-50. And then some legal issues arose and some uncertainty on the CPA and the funding and the like. And we were asked, you may remember, last October for us to vote and request the select board to commit the whole $7.5 million from the trust to avoid any near-term uncertainty from the state and federal funders of the BHA. That had to be totally solid. And we did that, and we were able to do that at that point in October, because we had received the free cash that had been, from the free cash waterfall, and our balance was up to where we could do the whole 7.5, even though it left us with only 900,000. So we all did it. Everybody was on board, but anticipating that at some point the trust was going to be replenished and not be overburdened, and so that's where we're back at the moment. So that this can all be done, and it's on the beginning of the track. It's going to come to the HAB. Bernard is aware of this, the select board will get that. They will be able to do this at their next meeting after the HAB makes its request. So that's
and our next meeting is the evening of the return of the RFI.
If it's the evening of the return of the RFI, that may not be sufficient time for both understanding what we're getting, assuming that date is not extended at all, but also the HAB. And if we need to have a special meeting, I guess we would have a special meeting if it was necessary to compress the time frame and get a timely select board vote.
I just throw that out.
No, it's good to know. Thanks for reminding us of that, because we are going to watch the calendar and we're going to compress this as much as we can, and it looks doable sufficiently in advance, well enough in advance of the September 2nd date for sure.
So just to be clear, so the issues about getting with the community president, getting the CPA money into the project instead have been resolved or not resolved?
Into what project?
Into the Walnut High project.
That's going to require several steps that are sort of in play. I wouldn't want to jump too far ahead and say everything's resolved, but the time frame to do it is in place, and the steps that are necessary are there as well.
And the commitment of the path from all parties is agreed to?
Not quite, but it's going to have to happen one way or another.
I mean, isn't that an integral part of bringing up the money to make this all happen? I'm sorry to.
Well, the commitment has been made of the CPA funds.
Okay.
The detail of how they make their way into replenishing the trust or getting the trust able to release these available funds. The detail of that remains, but it's doable one way or another without requiring a lot of time.
Roger, can I add something?
Sure.
I don't think that we should assume that once the CPA money is in the hands of the trust, that means that we would spend $3 million on this project.
No.
I mean, just please be careful not to think that, because there's some concern that maybe this is not the best use of that money. I mean, I think that it would be a disaster if there's a luxury condos going up on this site, but doesn't necessarily mean that this is the best use of the money in the trust fund.
Yeah, it's just, I totally agree. And it's a question of, right now we've got 933. That introduces some uncertainty if we have a qualified third party, if that would write the $3 million down enough. And it wouldn't mean that we're looking to write the whole thing down to zero, and putting $3 million in. But let's say we found a plausible sponsor that needed a total of $1.5 million, or pick a number, that we needed to stretch and get. The best way that we can do that is this short pathway of several steps. That's the one place the trust fund can get relief.
Yeah.
Even if it's a bigger amount of money, and Bernard's absolutely right. It doesn't mean at all that we would be using all of it or even most of it.
Although once we get a number that we'd have to contribute to a developer, then we can have the discussion as to what's the best use of our funds.
Right. I guess, and this is an open question, if there were other ways for funds to flow in on behalf of the town to write down the 3 million more than the trust has in its current balance, you know, everybody's all ears, but I know those of us that have spoken about it can't think of any other device other than the trust to do this. If there's no other HAB comments or questions, and there'll still be plenty of opportunity. I know we have a couple of people that have returned to share in this meeting and discussion, including Susan and Deb Brown, Susan Senator and Deb Brown. Susan, did you want to? I saw you had your hand up before. You want to unmute?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, I do have a question.
Tell us, remind us from, I know you were here previously, of who you are and the nature of your interest, et cetera.
Okay, I'm the mother of a 35-year-old man with pretty severe autism who is currently in a very successful group home run by state funding and a nonprofit. And I have been advocating for services and supports and education for his population for his whole life. And I was on the school committee. And this project really interests me because I just would really love to see the 16 Williams remain a group home or housing for affordable housing for people. I really am so happy that this board is so active in this. So the question I have though is I'm wondering how much you have engaged with the Price Center in terms of wiggle room and in their price. Given that their mission is to I'm reading right from it, empower individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities, including autism, to thrive in living, social, and work communities. Why would they be so willing to work for luxury housing? I understand, I'm not naive. I understand that $3 million is a lot of money for this organization, but I just wonder how public they've been about this choice of theirs. And I also do wonder if there's wiggle room in a way to appeal this tight deadline.
Great questions. Both are good, related, separate questions, and I think they are the kind of outreach that should be undertaken unless there's anybody else in this meeting that knows of anything that's already been done informally. I'm not aware and haven't done it myself. Anybody on the screen that wants to either comment or?
I'll jump in, Roger.
Yeah.
Susan, so first of all, I'm Kara Bruton. I'm the Director of Planning for the town of Brookline. And definitely that idea that our missions are aligned here, the two organizations, the town of Brookline and the Price Center, it was definitely part of the last conversation that we had with them. There's many ways that they could have been more obstructive than they have been, and they haven't. They've been definitely a working partner. And now that the RFI is, publicly out, I want to be careful and making sure that we treat any respondents the same with any Q&A. But I think once we get those responses back, and that's partly why we wanted to have that be a short period and then a longer period after that, is to work out all of the different contracts and agreements and possibilities that could come about once we get those responses back, both between, the town and the respondent, but possibly even just a direct conversation between the respondent and the Price Center. So there's all kinds of ways where this could land, and we've tried to bake in enough time to have that happen, but after they can see that there are, hopefully, knock on wood, a good number of organizations who are qualified, capable, and ready to take this over and have some, funding strategy, but for whatever, fill in the blank is needed.
It does in terms of the timing. I think you're absolutely right, Kara. Both both the timing of that kind of communication as well regarding the money side, but also the timing in terms of the date when the formal closing, not the closing, but the formal commitment is needed.
Yeah, and they're they've been pretty public in saying that the reason that they're selling this property, so the reason for the timing and the funding is to care for the clients that they have, right? The residents that they have here are aging, and they're looking for a one-story location, and at the same time trying to lock down a deal with the property in Needham. So they have moving parts too, just like any real estate transaction. So we'll see where we get, but so far they've been very willing to share with us information and work with us in a cooperative way.
Yeah, we may get a range of respondents whose missions would be closer or further away from what the Price Center's special needs mission is. That would be our ideal realm to replace. But speaking more broadly, as the advocates for affordable housing, including SROs, we would also consider having managed to accomplish something really good here if even if we didn't get the special needs part, which would be the ideal, there might be a sponsor that would continue to provide the affordability for the SRO model that wasn't necessarily special needs. So I think we've got all together here, and with Price and Susan Yu, the same priority to seek special needs as the ideal outcome. Deborah.
Yes, Brookline CDC is very interested. We have been speaking with developer partners because, this is going to be a fairly complicated project. We also kind of started gnashing our teeth when we looked at the short turnaround time for, I think it's September 1. So, but,
September
we're very,
2nd, yeah. September 2nd.
Right. So we're very much interested. We believe that we want it to all be affordable. I hear Jonathan's point about trying to mix the income backgrounds, but that's, that could be a hill too high for a property that's as small as this, just based on some preliminary conversations I've been having. So it will, we'll be submitting questions to you, Emily, about some of the composition in terms of residents and clients, and how the numbers work out in those instances. But it's very interesting, and we're eager to get an application in on time.
Thanks, Deb. Just hearing the discussion, thinking back to Susan and your description and perspective on this, and knowledge of housing for people based on special needs and of being autistic. Would all of the units be able to be deed restricted under the other housing that you're familiar with, or would they not be all able to be deed restricted?
I'm not sure. Okay. Yeah. I'm not sure about that. I think that for one thing, I know that a traditional group home supported by the state has to be 5 people, 5 individuals. So this house is too big for a state-funded group home, but there are lots of other kinds of models. That's probably not what you're asking, though. I want to make sure I understand.
Well, you had mentioned that your son has a housing living situation in Boston, I think, and I didn't know specifically whether, and if you were able to share with us whether that's a deed restricted type of housing arrangement or another form of housing.
Can you explain to me what deed restricted means?
Sure. That the resident occupants with the special needs are able to qualify as not having incomes that exceed a certain level, which could be recorded as part of the allowable use of the property.
Right.
I apologize for interrupting, but I had thought this would go till 6:30, so I'm going to have to sign off. With
okay,
apologies.
Justin. Yep, thanks.
Apologies.
All of the residents are using SSI, 66%, I believe, of their SSI to go towards the housing and the staff. And it has to be that way, and they have to have a priority one also rating from DDS, Department of Developmental Services.
So their income is, by virtue of that, of what you're describing, is limited, whether it's officially deed restricted on the property. You're not necessarily certain of that, but it could be, I guess.
I mean, I know that in my son's house, there could not be anyone else but people who are limited to about 2,000 a month.
Yeah, so you don't need a deed restriction, the state rules sort of limit the income.
If it qualified for the long term by, that restricted the owner's ability to, not engage in alternative uses over time, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, we did say this was gonna be a 1-hour meeting, so I don't wanna be, guilty of running us over too long, and unless there's anything else on 16 Williams, I would only mention a 30-second item, and unless Emily has something, do you have anything else, Emily?
No, I'm gonna put my email in the chat that just so people have it for questions.
Okay, so, at our last, this is very quick, at our last HAB meeting, when we discussed the request from Deb, who's here still, which is good, by BCDC for some kind of building permit waiver on their upcoming projects. I probably jumped a little too quickly to restate what the current town's policy was, which is only the BHA that does this. But I did hear several HAB members express that maybe BCDC might qualify for some kind of similar, if not identical, unique status or relationship in its role as Brookline's CDC for housing, that maybe we shouldn't decide too quickly not to proceed and request some kind of relief for BCDC. So all I wanted to say at this meeting is we're going to put that on the agenda for those of you that did mention that in the last meeting, to discuss further at our meeting on the 14th. And Deborah and I have spoken briefly. I see it as a two-step process if we're going to take this up. One would be to discuss it as a policy first, and then second, to say if we want to recommend a policy and that has some legs to get approval, then to grant that exception to BCDC. So that's, as far as I'm concerned, we're ready to adjourn, but I see Carol's hand up.
I was going to move to adjourn.
Okay, second.
Can I just say one thing before we do that? Promise I won't keep you too long. Just going back to the AHOD, Emily mentioned a project in Somerville that was being proposed under their AHOD, and she put a link in. I looked at that link, and it's very interesting because it's a little different than what we're talking about. It's 288 units, of which 132 are affordable. That's 45% of the. It's also described as a 40B, 45% affordable. But of those affordable units, most of them are at 80%, or well, some of them are up to 80%, which, RKG says that might not work. So they're up to 80% AMI. 12% of them are at 30% of AMI of the 45%. So 45% affordable project, 208 units, and also no parking at all for nearly 300 units. It's worth looking at. It's an interesting project. That's all.
Well, you got that onto the recording, Steve. So you've now made a statement that will last in perpetuity for future consideration. And with that, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody.